pleasure to welcome to Atlanta LaDonna Redmond, not for the first time. I had met here earlier at a conference for the Community Food Security Coalition, and I was so impressed with the work that she's doing on the west and south sides in Chicago. She is currently the Senior Program Associate with the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, IATP. Some of us remember this organization as being, first of all, one of the first places that continued to publish and publicize food system globalization issues 20, 25 years ago, before it was as currently popular as it is today. But they also were a key organization in the Battle of Seattle and the struggle against the WTO and the international control by corporations of the food system. She was formerly the president of the Institute for Community Resource Development in the Austin West Garfield neighborhood. That name for me is a very powerful name because at a very early stage in my life, that's where I had the great privilege of meeting Martin Luther King Jr. as he was working to create the Union to End the Slums, which was the northern component of the civil rights movement that emerged shortly before his untimely death. And the Austin West Garfield neighborhood went on to be a prime location of the PUSH organization, and that is where LaDonna began to cut her teeth as an organizer. She continued to be very involved later with trying to bring fresh, local, and organic food into the neighborhood, starting urban agriculture long before we were moving in that direction here in Atlanta, creating farmers markets, buying clubs, and ultimately a community grocery store called Graffiti and Grub, which I'm sure she will mention today, and which used the hip-hop idiom to bring youth into the food movement. And then, recognizing that a fair, just, and healthy food system for all requires us to move to scale and to move to a more national effort, she began to be involved in federal farm policy and the Farm Bill, which has led to her current work with IATP. She is a graduate of Antioch College. I always love to remind ourselves what the founder of Antioch said, which was, "Be ashamed to die before you have won some great battle for humanity." And LaDonna has certainly accomplished many a great battle. She was named by the Chicago Tribune, the Tribune's Good Food Award in 2003 and 2006. She was recognized by Essence Magazine as a woman shaping the world, and by Time Magazine as one of our national food innovators. Please join me in welcoming LaDonna Redmond.
Thank you so much. I hadn't expected a standing ovation. What a surprise at 9 o'clock in the morning. I know I'm in the South, so I'm gonna stick this up here because I know y'all understand the other pocketbook. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak with you today about something that I love more than anything. And I always start off, every talk by acknowledging those that have gone before me. Of course, call the name of Dr. King who's gone before me, but I also have to call the names of, my own ancestors, people who have given their lives so that I might have life. I have to acknowledge them and bring their spirit into the room. I also acknowledge the ancestors, your ancestors, those who have come before you that have given their life and to give you life to be here. And so without them, we could not be together today. So we stand strong because we stand on those shoulders, and standing strong on those shoulders will help us change some of the issues that are facing us, so that those who come after us will also be standing on our shoulders and standing strong and be proud of our shoulders. I got a lot to say, and I got a lot of slides, so I'm going to talk real fast. Take notes. write down the questions and ask me what I said later. I guarantee you I won't remember. But I'm here to talk to you about food justice. And I want you to know that one of the premises that I believe is that every community has the intellect to see itself. So you really won't hear me talk about an expert opinion or anything like that. This is a quote that I took from someone who developed the Chicago Park District system, Jans Jensen. Many of you may know him, and it's so beautiful that I'm looking at this Chipotle because in Garfield Park Conservatory we had the Chipotle exhibit as well. And the Chipotle is the glass what is it called? The glass sculpture, yes, in the fountain this morning. And it's a beautiful reminder of my home, Chicago. Anyway, Jans Jensen was this world-renowned architect, and people thought that, you know, he just put together the most beautiful park using natural landscapes. And he was moving and retiring to the South. I believe he was born to Kentucky. And people were saying to him, oh, this is so wonderful that you're moving to Kentucky. The people are so lucky to have you come because you're going to come and going to make everything so beautiful when you get there. And he said, no, not really. All I have is a skill set. Whatever folk need in Kentucky when I get there, they already are the experts on that. I can help them facilitate what it is they want, but I don't have any expertise to share with them because every community has intellect to heal itself. They already know what they need. So I've adopted that as a part of my model. I do believe that every community has intellect to heal itself. I'm not doing this work because I'm a dietitian. I don't have a degree in this. And I'm not doing this to get a degree in it. I'm doing this work because of my son. My son developed food allergies at a very early age. I'm doing this because I'm an expert at being a mom. And if any of you are parents, you know that you will give your last and to do anything to save your son or your child. My son developed food allergies. He's allergic to all shellfish. He's allergic to all dairy products. He's allergic to eggs and peanuts. And we found this out when he was about 6 months old. And he's 14 now, so this is a little while ago. But because of his food allergies, we were constantly faced with hospitalizations because he would be exposed to an allergen. It would create an allergic reaction. We would have to go to the emergency room. The emergency room stay would turn into a hospital stay that would last anywhere from 7 to 10 days. He would be put on steroids, and then he would get better, and then we didn't know he was allergic to something. He would have another allergic reaction. And so then we got into this real cycle of allergic reactions, hospitalizations, and not really sure what was going on. Until we finally got to the point where he was hospitalized and put on a BiPAP. And we were not sure whether his lungs would continue to operate because he had wheezed so long that the doctors felt that, you know, they might give out just from sheer exhaustion. I made a solemn promise that day that I was going to learn how to feed my baby, if that's what it took. Whatever it took, whoever got in my way, they were going to get knocked down. Whatever I needed to do, I was going to feed my baby. And I've kept that promise, and I continue to keep that promise, not because it's my child, but for your children and any other children and my children's children. The issue of food insecurity has to be solved in our lifetime. There's no reason why we don't have enough food or have the right kind of food for people. It's simply because of political will. It's not because we can't grow it. It's not because we can't get it. So we have to create the political will to change the food system. But see, now I'm already at the end of my talk, so I'm going to have to go back to my son and his food allergies. What I also learned through my son's food allergies as I started to take on this issue of food justice, I started to realize that I really didn't know a whole lot about food. So I was really politicized through my learning about food. I was politicized through the organic food movement. I wanted food for my son that was healthy for him. Obviously, I couldn't have the stuff that he was allergic to. I had to have stuff that was without, processed. I could not use food that was highly processed. All food is processed in some way. But I couldn't use food that was highly processed. So center store stuff was no good for me. I had to figure out that I wanted the healthiest food for him. Meaning, I didn't want food that had so many chemicals in it or grown with it that when I matched it up as baby food, it was just sort of like some kind of chemical porridge. It just made me nervous. Then I also was exposed to something called GMOs. Are you all familiar about genetically modified organisms? I didn't want that. Now, some people might say, oh, there's nothing wrong with that, we eat GMOs, we're all good. You all are Georgia organics. I know you all agree that GMOs are not good for us, not good for the environment. I didn't want that either for my baby. I didn't know why. I just know that I should have a choice, and I didn't want to choose that. So that led me to understand that what I was looking for was organic food. So my idea around what to get really simply came out of a logical thought, not because I was a farmer or any kind of particular expert in that, except that I was driven to feed my child. So my understanding of food justice comes from the bottom looking up. It doesn't come from the top down. So when I talk about food justice, I was talking about my neighborhood, my community on the west side of Chicago. This gray area here is Chicago. And we work primarily in the Austin and the west, this is east and west Garfield areas. There's a larger study that we did, which this slide is a part of, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of how to orientate Chicago, or my community, to the rest of Chicago. Austin is the largest community in the city of Chicago, over 170,000 residents. And its nutritional environment, we've had 64 bodegas. There was one supermarket, $134 million spent on groceries by those residents, and 80% of that left the community. So when we looked at the Austin community to find out what was really going on, we just found out that, as you can see, that little one dot was all he had, plus the 64 stores that were surrounded, smaller stores. This was my understanding of the food system. Pretty much that we have land, it goes into production, you have a distribution of it some kind of way, it gets processed, you sell it, and then it goes back around again. So in order to solve what I thought was a problem in terms of the issue of food access, one of the things that I found out was that I couldn't find this food readily available in my neighborhood. So when I was looking for organic food 14 years ago, I had to go outside of my neighborhood, significantly outside of my neighborhood, to find what I was looking for. Food that was free from GMOs, food that was free from pesticides, food that was not highly processed. Was not readily available in my neighborhood. And I gotta tell you, I'll tell you a quick story. The reason that I even realized it wasn't readily available was basically because I called my sister one day. And my brother-in-law answered the phone, and I said, where's Val? She went to the grocery store. She'll be back in like 10 minutes, give her a call back. I'm like, 10 minutes? What's 10 minutes from my house? How can she grocery shop in 10 minutes? I have to go all over the city to find stuff that I'm looking for, and my sister can grocery shop 10 minutes from my house. So I did a little experiment, and I started trying to shop 10 minutes from my house, and I could not buy the things that I needed for my family 10 minutes from my house. I could get every variety of fried chicken 10 minutes from my house. I could get Popeyes, Church's, Kentucky Fried Chicken. I could get Uncle Remus. I don't know if y'all got Uncle Remus down here. So we have Uncle Remus in Chicago. We have Harold's Chicken. I could get every kind of hamburger. I could get every kind of taco. I could get all kinds of cigarettes with great variety. I didn't even know there were so many kinds of cigarettes and potato chips. I could get varieties of potato chips, hot chips, ranch chips. What are those things called? They have a nacho flavored chip. They have all kinds of chips that I could get, but I couldn't get an organic tomato. I could get designer clothes. I could even get bootleg designer clothes. I could get a semi-automatic weapon. I could find narcotics. I could get cocaine. I could get heroin. But I couldn't get a cup of yogurt. So the issue in the community is not the distribution system at all, because clearly it's operating in some capacity. But what it's bringing to the community is the problem. So to solve that problem, for me, food justice meant getting vacant lots, converting them to converting those vacant lots to urban farm sites. This is my home in the back here. And we literally converted lots in the front and in the back of our houses. We ended up with about 10. We tested the soil. We worked with kids from the community, and I have a whole other philosophy about kids and urban farm sites, but I'll share that with you all later. These kids were part of a program, an environmental science program, and they literally came around and tested our soil first so that we knew what the soil levels were, both in terms of nutrients and contaminants. We brought in compost, yards of it, created raised beds, and created the farm sites. We did not hire youth for our program. We hired men who were out of the job system. We hired the uncles and the fathers of these young people who were not working anymore. And we paid them. Because the idea that I had was that if I could get Poopy's uncle off the porch, I might be able to get Poopy off the porch. But first I had to prove to him that I was really interested in their well-being and their family's well-being. So it was no sense in me going after the kids. I needed to get his father. And so as we started to hire young men, well not young men, but men from our community who had skills. They were tradesmen, they were carpenters and electricians, and for whatever reason, construction workers who had fallen out of the job market. When we started to hire them, then we started to get the attention of our young people in our community. We developed a farmer's market. We did a grocery store. We did several iterations of a grocery store. I did one called Organicos. I did one called Graffiti and Grub. I did another one called Family Fresh. So I'm a serial grocery store operating kind of person. But I've done a couple of those, and you know, they all have their interesting levels of success and failure. Then comes along this phrase, food desert. How many of you all have heard this phrase? How many of y'all use it? I'm gonna ask you to stop. Food and desert do not go together. Desert does not indicate lack. The desert is a complete ecosystem. It has a food system in it. The word food desert, on top of all this work that we was doing, all this beautiful work, all this digging in the dirt, somebody decided to do a study and say, there's no supermarkets. It must be a food desert. There's a problem with that phrase, food desert, and I'll get to it a little later in the presentation. But desert does not indicate lack. And if you've got 64 bodegas in a community and people who are cooking every day, you don't have lack of food. That's not the issue. And the solution to lack of food is not in our communities is not necessarily a supermarket intervention. When I was doing those urban farm sites and hiring folk, I was not digging in that dirt thinking, ooh, we are sure will be glad when Walmart come and build a grocery store. That was not what I was talking about. What I'm talking about is self-sufficiency. I sure will be glad when we can operate effective grocery stores that actually make money in our community. I'll be really happy when we have a viable local food system that can employ people. Be happy about that. But I was not thinking about Walmart or any major chain grocery store coming into the community under the pretense of providing food justice for us. So I'm going to ask you, you know, you scratch the phrase food desert out of your vocabulary when you are describing community, because you don't live in a food desert, nobody you know lives in one. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why you need to eliminate that word from your vocabulary or phrase. When I started, also after the food desert thing came up, I was really upset about that because that study was supported by a bank. And this particular bank would not give me a loan to do the work that I was trying to do or a grant. And I'm like, so who are you going to give your money to if you're not going to give it to the people that's working on food? They're going to give it to the major chain grocery store. So I'm like, well, where are we in this conversation? Where is soul food in this conversation? As an African American, I have been taught from a very early age that soul food is it's okay, but you know what? You can't, you know, not even you can't eat too much of it. It's bad for you. Don't eat that. And I've been taught that on a lot of different levels. And I know being in the South, you all might resonate with it. When I say soul food, y'all know what I'm talking about. food, people don't say it's bad for you, but ain't it just as bad? They say, ooh, it's heavy. I was in Paris a couple years ago, and I was, eating French food, like, oh, it's rich. Don't nobody say it's bad for you. Don't run from it. Don't ever eat it. But soul food gets a pretty bad rap. There's a whole with African Americans, there's a whole socio-political debate around the meaning of the swine and the pig. I mean, you get real deep if you have a room full of black folk and they are getting ready, somebody got support. Somebody gonna fall out. Because they can't get some, somebody don't want it in there. So this issue of food, I began to understand it's not just about whether somebody has it or not. It's about its meaning. What does it mean when it appears on my table and in my room? This was not a part of the food desert study, nor was it a part of the food justice movement that I was getting involved in. And it was really funny to me because I would come into the room and I'd be the only African American person. I'm so glad it's not that way today. I don't know what to do. But more so then, my story around food was not included in the narrative of what food meant. And that was a big problem for me. So, as I told you before, this was my food system. That's my understanding of the food system. But as I started to get more and more involved in what I was trying to work on and what was I trying to change and how did we get so far off on this food desert conversation, this new message came out. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants, from Michael Pollan, right? Great idea. But how do you do that in a community where you can get a gun quicker than you get a tomato? So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna have to revise my food justice conversation. So this is food justice 2.0 that I'm gonna show you. Neocolonialism. If you continue to use the phrase food desert, you really are talking about, it really is the Trojan horse of corporate control of our food system. Really, the solution to food deserts is to bring more corporate control. Basically, let's bring in the supermarket. We're going to feed you. Now, how many of y'all, I know y'all all have been to supermarkets and you go to supermarkets, but do supermarkets inherently have healthy food in them just because they're supermarkets? No. So the issue is not the retail access to the food. So when you're talking about the food desert, you're implying that solution is a major chain grocery store, when it's not. The study itself doesn't even look at things that you all work on, urban agriculture. It says that's a non-solution. Farmers markets, growing more farmers, it's not a part of the equation to eliminate food deserts. This is our food system. We have a global industrial complex, much like the prison industrial complex. The prison industrial complex is supplied and built upon the backs of men's culture. So is our food system. The pieces of our food system go beyond just agriculture, as you can see right here. We have financial services. I know you all probably are talking with many of the folks that you work with around price fluctuations in the food system. Our financial services, our regulations control those price fluctuations, as well as supply. We talk about warehousing and distribution, but very rarely do we talk about research and development, except to say that we don't like GMOs. But we have to understand that research and development and education are really tied together. How much money does Cargill and ADM and Monsanto give to universities to do research to push their agenda around food that we really don't want? This is the food system, the industrial food complex that we're trying to change. It's very different from this one. So I usually ask people, well, what are we trying to do? We need to change the food system. And most people say we need to go back to a time when the farm was
father's son.
I read that in my father's article. I thought my head would spin. Well, the farm was sunlit. And everybody was happy and well fed. And I'm sitting there looking at this New York Times piece, wondering when the heck was that? It wasn't within the past 15 years that I've been doing food justice work. So I can rule out, 2000. I'm like, well, let me go back maybe to, the 1970s. And that's the introduction of high fructose corn syrup in the food system, so surely not then. Also, that was the beginning of the campaign to push soul food out of African American communities, and then the evolving of the fast food industry to fill that gap. That's when you start to see Kentucky Fried Chicken come in. Y'all remember Kentucky Fried Chicken used to make greens? Greens and mashed potatoes, then you had biscuits. And at the same time, the American Heart Association was telling African American people don't eat soul food. I'm not saying that this is a conspiracy, I'm just saying. So then we go back, maybe we can go back to the 1950s. We can talk about the introduction of different kinds of pesticides into our atmosphere. We could go back to the 1930s, and we can talk about the beginning of school lunch program. Folk in rural communities weren't eating that good. And so the food program was started because of the malnutrition of the males in those communities. So back to the I'm going all the way to the 1930s. Okay, I ain't found the perfect food system yet that we're going to go back to. But about the 1900s, early 1900s, turn of the century, surely find some perfection there, right? No, not at all. Great migration, black folk running up out the South because of Jim Crow, going to northern cities in search of land. 1800s, slavery, not happening. You won't even get me to consider that there was a possibility that it was a healthy, just, or fair food system at that time. 1700s, 1600s, eradication of Native Americans, pushing them off of their land. Our government policy to kill them, not work with them, kill them. Eliminate them completely. We never had a fair, just, and healthy food system in the United States. So the work that you're doing today is pioneering. You can't look back and find the fair, just, and healthy food system. You have to look forward. You have to develop the courage of your conviction to do this work. Whatever you're convinced about is what's going to take you forward. But you can't look back and find nothing back there except the story of what not to do. It's very hard for us to sometimes in this country to have a conversation about race and class, but we're going to have that conversation a little bit today. Because without the story of the land in the United States, you cannot engage all the communities who need to be at the table in a substantive dialogue about how to change the food system. Because they essentially feel left out. What I've learned to do is include narratives of color in my conversations about food and food justice. And talk about colonialism and historical trauma, particularly how historical trauma has created some of the health disparities and should be used as a framing for public health. It's not, of course, this individual behavior. It's the story of what people are responding to within their behavior, with their behavior. What are they doing? Not so much why are they doing it, but what happened to you. Being able to talk with my Native American friends about Indian removal. And being able to understand that food was used as a weapon to kill them. I'm going to have to speak up a bit because I done got the time thing and I ain't pilot done. But I just want you to see some of the images around. This is a 1830 map of how Native Americans were pushed off of their land. And of course, the importation of African slaves. And how the very same land that the Native Americans were pushed off of was used, was where Africans were forced and today modern day slavery. These are people who are still picking our tomatoes for us and our grapes and not paying a fair wage. We still have a food system that's based upon slavery. And until we get through the issue of slavery in our food system today, we will not have a fair, just, fair food system. We cannot have a food system built on any kind of exploitation of land or labor. And of course, we have eco-trauma. We're living this right now, particularly on the East Coast, in Louisiana, Minneapolis. I'll show a picture of this kitchen, because I sort of like this kitchen. It's not my kitchen. I wish it was my kitchen. It's not my kitchen, but this is the ideal kitchen. But we have to understand that around the world, we have a story to tell. People have different kinds of kitchens. Some people are standing in line in their kitchen. So what are some of the solutions? I've used hip-hop. I use whatever I can to get people to the table. I've used hip-hop to organize young people to understand what healthy lifestyles mean through the lens of hip-hop, using the elements of hip-hop and engagement. We're working through a project called Sankofa's Kitchen right now at IATP, where we engage our community partners around food at the table and really restoring the indigenous food system, as well as the African-American traditional cuisines, returning to the kitchen of our ancestors, returning to the traditions of cooking, and engaging in community with folk at the table. So creating that vision, we have to go beyond the Farm Bill. We just hosted a conference called Food Plus Justice Equals Democracy. And the conference was very different and innovative in that we used narratives, and we had people's movement assemblies. And our people's movement assemblies broke down along these areas of historical trauma, local food and public investment, hunger relief, economic disparities in industrial food system, land, and labor and immigration. And what came out of these PMAs was a series of principles that we put together with about 360 people who spent 3 days together. You can go to our website and see these. I know I won't be able, obviously, to go through them with you right now. But the goal is to create a grassroots movement across the country to encourage President Obama to expand the executive order mandating environmental justice to include food justice. I think it's a perfectly logical thing for him to do. But I do think we have to ask him. I don't feel that I love President Obama and I love Michelle Obama. I'm very proud of them. But I don't think that President Obama has gone far enough to help us build a fair, just, and healthy food system, and I think we have to make it.
Sure.
What I like about this executive order is that it's a move. It talks about defining it. It's a movement. Environmental justice is a movement promoting the fair treatment of people of all races, income, and culture with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental law. If we could change that to environmental food laws, or environment and food laws, we can begin to have a dialogue with our federal government around how do we reconstruct a food system that is fair, just, and healthy. I know it's easy to say we can't do that because of this, that, and other. We're the only group of folks. Can't hear me? Turn it off. I think it went off. That might be. Okay, I'm almost done. We're the only group of folk, nonprofit folk is what I'm talking about, that can talk ourselves out of a good idea before we have it. So don't talk yourself out of this good idea. Just stay with me for a second. If you were sitting in the boardroom of McDonald's and somebody said, you know, St. Patrick's Day is coming up, we should make our milkshakes green. Nobody said, oh, that's crazy. That's what, you know, they put it into research and development. And next thing you know, you at the drive-thru with your kids and they're asking you for a green milkshake. The folks that may be looked upon as our opponents are fearless when it comes to idea implementation. We need a little bit of that courage. So I believe that we can do it. I believe that we have to do it. And I believe it would take all of us to do it. So we've asked communities across the country to host day meetings to go through these principles to see where they agree or where they don't agree or what needs to be changed. And I'm asking you all to spend some time in the very near future. I'll come back down and facilitate a meeting if necessary, but to have a dialogue about what a fair, just, and healthy food system will look like. I'm into visualization and the law of attraction. So this is my slide where we all are standing in the room with the president. And he gets the pens out, you know what I'm saying? And he signs the stack and passes them, and passes them around. But I want you to understand that that would just be the beginning of a very long road and a very long, long journey. Just the beginning of the journey to a fair, just, and healthy food system. Thank you.